My daughter stood under the wedding lights, raised her glass, and thanked another man for being the father she wished she had. The guests laughed, clapped, and welcomed him with open arms, while I sat alone at the back table, wearing the only suit I owned, holding the phone with my late wife's final message. And by the time her voice echoed through that crystal ballroom, nothing, absolutely nothing, looked the same ever again. Before I go on, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe, and maybe tell me where you're listening from today. These stories come from years I don't talk about often, and having someone on the other side of this moment, it eases the telling more than you might think. So thank you, truly, for being here with me. My mornings always began the same way, slow, quiet, familiar. I'd wake before the sun, not because I had to, but because men my age don't sleep the way they used to. My knees would remind me I'm not young anymore, my back would argue with the mattress, and for a moment, I'd just sit there, letting my breath catch up with me. Then I'd stand, stretch a little, and shuffle to the kitchen. The kettle in my small apartment took its time heating up. It made this soft, wobbling whistle, like an old friend clearing its throat. I'd pour the hot water over my coffee grounds, watch the steam rise in little curls, and feel the warmth settle into my hands. That simple warmth, it kept me grounded in ways I can't fully explain. My name is Michael Graves, though most people these days just call me Mike. I don't mind. Life has a way of simplifying itself whether you want it to or not. After my wife, Evelyn, passed, everything got quieter, and I learned to live inside that quiet without fighting it. My apartment isn't much. 1 bedroom, a narrow living room that always smells like fresh coffee, a little balcony where maple trees line up like they're standing guard. Nothing here screams success. Nothing hints at the work I once did. And that was by choice. Some mornings, I stand on that balcony and watch people rushing to work, ties crooked, phones buzzing, brows furrowed like the day already owes them something. I wonder how many of them understand that a life can be full even when it looks small from the outside. Evelyn used to tease me about it. She'd say, "Mike, you're going to grow old with a cup of black coffee and a stack of newspapers." And then she'd laugh, this soft musical laugh that filled the whole room. I still keep her scarf on the coat rack, light blue, a little worn at the edges. On winter mornings, I pick it up, run my thumb along the fabric, then place it back carefully. It's funny how small rituals keep the people you miss close. Our daughter Rachel grew up in a home filled with the kind of warmth you can't buy. She inherited Evelyn's laugh and my stubborn streak. When she was little, she'd run circles around the dining table until she got dizzy and toppled into my arms. I'd scoop her up, kiss her forehead, and tell her she was going to change the world someday. Those were the memories I lived on. Life, though, doesn't move in straight lines. When Evelyn fell sick, everything slowed, then twisted, then cracked in places I didn't even know existed. Cancer has a way of stripping life down to its truth. There were nights in the hospital where machines hummed softly, where nurses spoke in whispers, where Rachel curled up in the corner with her knees tucked to her chest. She was young, old enough to feel fear, too young to understand all the things we were protecting her from. But Evelyn understood our daughter better than anyone. One night, her hand cold in mine, she whispered, "Promise me, don't let her think money makes a life." I nodded. She squeezed my fingers and added, "She needs humility, Mike. Let her learn it, even if she resents you for a while." And I promised her. I kept that promise the only way I could. I stepped back, lived modestly. Let people believe I had nothing left after medical bills, after retirement, after losing the woman who shaped my entire world. I drove an aging sedan, wore simple clothes, shopped at discount stores, and let the world think what it wanted. Rachel went to college, graduated, and every struggle, every loan payment, every month she worried she wouldn't make rent, I quietly covered in the background. Not because I wanted praise, but because Evelyn would have wanted her supported, not spoiled. Then Rachel drifted into a new world, a brighter, shinier world of polished suits, sparkling dinners, and families who measured worth by the shine of their silverware. She didn't fall into it all at once. It was slow at first, then quick, then complete. Her visits became shorter, her calls fewer, her tone sharper around the edges. I told myself it was normal. Children grow, they change, they reach for things we never imagined. But in the evenings, with Evelyn's scarf in my hands and the kettle's whistle fading behind me, I'd sometimes feel something sharp settle in my chest. The kind of ache that comes from watching someone drift but not knowing how to call them home. And as I sat there in that soft, predictable quiet, a quiet I had grown used to, I didn't realize something important. That silence, the gentle, familiar kind, was the last real peace I would feel for a long time, because everything was about to change, and the truth was finally going to demand a voice. Rachel called one afternoon with a brightness in her voice that didn't sound like it had room for me.
"Dad, I have news," she said. Quick, excited.
I smiled into the phone. "Good news, I hope." "Yes, I'm getting married." The words came out rehearsed, almost like she'd practiced them for someone else and was repeating them for me. A warm feeling rose in my chest. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Tell me, who's the lucky one?" "His name is Adrian Langford," she said, softer now, but only slightly. "He comes from a very established family." I nodded to myself. "I'm happy for you, Rachel." And I was. Truly. There was a pause, thin, stretched, uneasy. "Dad, the wedding is in 3 months." 3 months? I murmured. Another pause. A quiet inhale. "That's soon, huh?" "Yes. And, Her voice drifted like she was searching for the right place to land. "They're hosting it at the Meridian Court Hotel." I'd seen the place in magazines. Ceilings like upside-down crystal oceans. Floors polished so bright they almost glowed. "Sounds beautiful," I said. "It is," she whispered. The silence between us started to swell. Then she finally said, "Dad." "About the seating arrangements?" I straightened. "What about them?" "You'll be at table 19, she said quickly, like ripping off a bandage. "In the back, near the service entrance." I blinked. "Table 19? "It's nothing personal," she rushed. "It's just, Adrian's family has very important guests, and the photographers need to capture the head tables, plus the partners, the board members, the executive friends." "I understand," I said quietly. I understood much more than she thought. She took another breath. "Dad, can you wear something nice? Maybe not your usual clothes." "My usual clothes. Plain shirts, old slacks, nothing extravagant." "I'll look respectable," I told her. "Good," she exhaled. "Thank you for understanding." When she hung up, I held the phone on my lap for a long time, my thumb resting on the dark screen. I wasn't angry. I wasn't shocked. I just felt hollow, like something had quietly slipped out of place inside me. But that wasn't the worst part. 2 weeks before the wedding, she invited me to dinner at Adrian's family estate. Estate, not home. The kind of place with a winding driveway, carefully manicured hedges, and front windows so tall they looked like they belonged to a museum. Rachel met me at the door with a hug so quick it barely touched my shirt. "You made it," she said, smiling the polite smile she used for strangers. Adrian's parents approached with smiles shaped like they had been measured and approved before use. "Mr. Graves," his mother said. "We've heard stories." I couldn't tell if she meant good ones. We sat at a long table with silverware heavy enough to double as paperweights. Candles flickered just so, as if even the flames understood the need for elegance. Halfway through dinner, between forced laughter and questions that felt like examinations, Adrian said, "Rachel tells us you used to have some government contracts, but things didn't end well." Rachel's eyes widened a hair, but she stayed silent. I swallowed, choosing my words. "Life changes. Careers shift." "Yes," Adrian's father added, swirling his wine. "But it's admirable you're rebuilding." Rebuilding. As if I had collapsed somewhere along the way. I kept the small smile on my face. Something like that. Then came the questions. What do you drive now? Do you still own any property? How are you managing retirement financially? Each one shaped to look harmless, but every one of them landing somewhere tender. After dessert, the real cut arrived. Rachel reached for my hand, squeezed lightly like she was adjusting her grip on a microphone, and said, "Dad, at the wedding, Adrian wants to acknowledge his mentor. The man he sees as a second father." I looked at her. "A second father." She nodded. "Yes, Mr. Wyndham has guided him for years, and honestly, he's been like family to me too." My chest tightened. "So during the wedding, he'll be honored as your father figure." She hesitated. "Dad, it's important for their image." Image. She didn't even hear herself. I just don't want you to feel uncomfortable, she said with a delicate smile. But we want things to look polished, sophisticated, uncomplicated. I nodded slowly. Of course, whatever makes the day easier for you. She hugged me again, barely a brush of shoulders, and walked away before I could exhale. Inside, though, something went still. Very still. Driving home, streetlights smeared across the windshield like long, tired streaks. The hum of the road blurred beneath me. I wasn't angry, not even close. Anger is sharp and fast. This was quiet. Heavy, like a door closing from the inside. But the worst part, it came later. A small sentence, a soft tone. A moment that snapped whatever was left untouched. And that's when I knew I would not stay silent. The days after that dinner felt muted, like someone had draped a soft cloth over my life and turned the volume down on everything I used to hear clearly. I went back to my routines, coffee at dawn, slow steps down the hallway, sorting the mail at the counter. But each moment felt heavier, as though the air itself had thickened. Even the kettle's whistle, usually a comforting sound, carried a thin, lonely note. Most evenings, I'd sit in my old armchair with Evelyn's scarf draped over the back. I'd just sit there, hands resting on my knees, staring at the wall as if the paint might reveal the part of the story I'd missed. Not angry, not bitter, just trying to understand how the world had changed its shape around me without a sound. It wasn't that Rachel had stepped into a new life. That's natural, expected, hoped for. No, what hurt was how easily she had redrawn the old one, as if the years she came from were a blemish she needed to erase before standing in her new circle. I found myself drifting into old memories without meaning to. Not the big ones, just the small pieces that once stitched us together. Like when she was 6, and a thunderstorm shook the windows. She ran into our bedroom, dove between Evelyn and me, and whispered, "Daddy, keep the loud sky away." I wrapped my arm around her while Evelyn pulled the blanket over us like a tent. She slept with her tiny hand curled into my shirt, or those afternoons at the park when she was learning to ride her bike. She'd fall every single time, and she'd look at me before she looked at her scraped knees. Not for pain, for reassurance, as if my face told her whether she was still safe in the world. Now she had people who measured safety by bank accounts, power and reputation, things that decay faster than anyone admits. Some nights, I'd catch myself setting 2 plates at the table, mine and Evelyn's. Then I'd pause, blink at the mistake, and quietly put the second plate away. It wasn't grief anymore, just habit. A habit built over decades of sharing life with someone who understood me in ways words never could. I never felt ashamed of the life I lived now. Never felt embarrassed by my modest apartment or my old sedan. I wasn't hiding from the world. I was fulfilling a promise. No, the sting wasn't from my circumstances. It was from realizing how quickly my daughter believed the world's story about me over the one she grew up inside. A week before the wedding, Rachel called again. Her voice was polished, professional, like she was giving a work update. "Dad, the ceremony outline is finalized," she said. "Good," I answered softly. "And about the toasts." I felt the air shift. "What about them?" "There won't be one from you." I closed my eyes for a moment. "Because of where I'm seated." "No," she said, too fast. "It's just, this is a very high-profile event. Adrian's father thinks the speeches should be consistent." "Consistent," I repeated. "Structured," she added. "Sophisticated." A silence rolled through the phone. I spoke gently. "Rachel, do you think I would embarrass you?" Her breath caught, just slightly. The silence that followed answered more honestly than words ever could. "I just want everything to go perfectly," she whispered. "I see," I murmured. "Dad," she pleaded, softer now. "Don't make this harder. Just be there. That's all I need. Just be there." A 4-word dismissal wrapped in silk. After the call ended, I stepped out onto the balcony. The night air brushed against my face. Cars hummed faintly on distant streets. Windows across the city glowed with warm squares of light. Thousands of lives carrying on without knowing anything about mine. I leaned forward on the railing, letting my breathing slow. I wasn't angry. Anger is a flame that dies quickly. What I felt was heavier than heat, quieter than pain, a kind of stillness that settles deep in your ribs when you finally understand something you didn't want to understand. That night, for the first time in a long while, I couldn't sleep. I got out of bed, walked into the living room, and picked up Evelyn's old phone, the one she kept by her bedside during those last months. The case was faded, the screen lightly scratched, but when I held it, I felt the echo of her hand inside mine. I scrolled through the old photographs, Rachel with missing teeth, Evelyn laughing in the sun, the three of us at a park, smiling at a picnic table like we were frozen in a kinder time. Then I reached the recording, the one Evelyn left behind, the one I had never played since the day she passed. I didn't press it. Just seeing her name on the screen made my chest tighten. I placed the phone gently on the table, afraid even the sound of it touching wood would hurt. I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and lifted it to my lips. And in that moment, my hand shook. Not from age, not from weakness, but from the weight of everything I had carried in silence. I set the glass down carefully and stared at my faint reflection in the window. And a quiet certainty settled over me. I had been waiting for peace, for understanding, for things to correct themselves. But peace was not coming. Not on its own. So I took a long breath, steady, intentional, and I began to think, slowly, deliberately. Because if Rachel was building her life on lies, then I had a responsibility to show her the truth. Not to punish her, but to guide her back. And for the first time in years, I felt something shift inside me. Resolve. The morning after that sleepless night, I sat at my small kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. I wasn't trembling anymore. Something inside me had settled, not in defeat, but in clarity, an old, steady kind of strength I had almost forgotten. For years, I'd told myself silence was noble, that keeping my wealth hidden, living quietly, and letting Rachel grow on her own would protect her from the wrong kind of people. But now she was walking straight into their arms, blindfolded, and thinking they were lifting her up. I sighed, long and slow, and whispered into the empty room, "Evelyn, I think the time has come." I reached for the worn leather folder tucked inside my cabinet, the one I hadn't touched in years. It held the things I'd kept hidden not for myself, but to shield the people I loved. I laid each document on the table one by one. Bank ledgers, the deeds under trust, the legal agreements, and at the top, the contract Adrian's family had tried to shove under my nose years ago, pre-signed on their end, waiting only for my surrender. I smoothed the papers with my palm. No anger. Just truth staring back at me. Planning didn't happen in a rush. It unfolded slowly, carefully, like restoring an old photograph, one layer at a time. First, I made 3 copies of everything, physical and digital. Then I backed the phone recordings onto secure drives, each one encrypted and stored separately. Not out of paranoia, but because experience had taught me that the moment you show the truth, someone will try to bury it again. Next, I called someone I trusted, Nora Baines. Nora had been my attorney for almost 20 years. Smart, steady, no appetite for theatrics. She answered on the second ring. "Mr. Hale?" Her voice was warm, familiar. "I need to meet," I said quietly. "Not tomorrow, today." There was a pause on her end, not hesitation, but understanding. "Come by at noon," she said. "We'll talk privately." At her office, sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting soft lines across her desk. She didn't rush me, didn't interrupt. Just listened, the same way Evelyn once did. When I finished explaining everything, Nora leaned back, exhaled slowly, and tapped the folder with her finger. "You've been carrying this alone for how long?" 8 years, I said. She studied me for a moment. "You know," she said softly, "most men would have used this wealth the moment people treated them poorly. You did the opposite. That takes character." I didn't respond. Praise felt out of place. "What do you want to do?" she asked finally. I looked out her window. Cars glided down the street below, each carrying someone with their own quiet battles, their own secrets. When I spoke, my voice was calm. "I want the truth ready," I said. "I want it preserved, notarized, authenticated, every angle covered. I don't want shouting matches or brawls or chaos. I just want clarity. I want them to see what they've chosen." Nora nodded. "That can be done calmly," she said, and firmly. We worked through the afternoon. Every document was scanned, time-stamped, notarized. Every recording verified. Every statement drafted with precision. When we were done, she closed the final binder and slid it toward me. "If the moment comes," she said, "you'll have everything you need." I rested my hand on the binder. The weight wasn't from paper. It was from years of silence finally taking shape. Back home, the sun dipped low behind the buildings, and my apartment filled with a soft amber glow. I sat at my desk, the same old wooden desk where I used to help Rachel with her school projects, and laid the binder beside Evelyn's phone. The room was quiet except for the steady tick of my wall clock. I looked at my reflection in the darkened window. Gray hair, lines carved by years of work and worry, eyes that had seen more than they ever admitted. I whispered to myself, almost as a reminder, silence served its purpose. Now truth must take its place. I rehearsed nothing, planned no speeches. Revenge, real revenge, the dignified kind, isn't about shouting or striking back. It's about timing. Letting the truth land when it must. Letting people reveal themselves before you reveal anything at all. And as I prepared each document, each file, each detail, I felt Evelyn's presence more clearly than I had in years, as though she stood just behind me, her hand on my shoulder. Guide her, she had whispered. Don't let her lose her way. I swallowed hard. Don't worry, I murmured. I won't. I placed everything into a single simple folder. No flash, no drama. A folder that could change the shape of an entire room with nothing more than quiet truth. I turned off the desk lamp, stood up, and looked around my dim apartment, the place where I had once thought I would grow old in peace. But peace had a cost, and I was ready to pay it. I took a long breath, steady and slow. The stage was set. All I had to do now was wait. The day of the wedding arrived with skies so clear they looked polished. I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the collar of my suit. It wasn't expensive, just clean, pressed, and honest. I didn't need to look wealthy. I only needed to look like myself. When I arrived at the Meridian Court Hotel, the lobby shimmered with gold light. Guests floated through the space in tuxedos and chiffon, their laughter echoing like distant bells. Rachel and Adrian's world, polished, curated, untouchable, was on full display. Nobody noticed me at first. That was fine. I'd spent 8 years getting comfortable being invisible. I found my seat, table 19, just as she'd planned. Near the service doors, far from the cameras, close enough to hear the clatter of plates but not the sound of my daughter's voice unless someone repeated it secondhand. I sat quietly, folded my napkin across my lap and waited. The ceremony passed in a blur of vows and applause. Rachel looked beautiful, a beauty that hurt a little, because it reminded me of her mother. I swallowed that ache and let it settle beneath my ribs. Then came the reception. The moment when the lights dimmed, when the couple took the stage, when each side of the family was supposed to be honored. Adrian stepped up to the microphone, glass in hand, the kind of smile that photographs well. Tonight, he said, I'd like to honor a man who has guided us, shaped us, and shown us what true leadership looks like. His hand swept toward Mr. Wyndham. The room erupted in applause. And Rachel, my daughter, she rested her head on another man's shoulder, smiling, beaming, proud to call someone else father in front of hundreds. My hands didn't shake, my breath didn't quicken, but something inside me loosened, like the last knot on a rope finally giving way. And when Adrian said, "He is the man Rachel always wished she had growing up," I knew the moment had come. I reached for the folder beneath my chair, stood slowly, and walked toward the stage, not rushed, not dramatic, just quietly, like a man heading toward the truth. At first, people barely noticed. A waiter sidestepped me. A photographer lowered her camera, confused. Then someone whispered, "Is that her father?" By the time I reached the steps, the room had fallen into a hush you could fold in half. Rachel's smile vanished. Adrian frowned. Mr. Wyndham straightened in his seat as if preparing for a performance. I took the microphone from the stand, not snatching it, but lifting it gently. My voice came out steady. "I won't take long." Even the chandeliers seemed to hold their breath. "I came here today to watch my daughter be happy, and I tried. I really did. But when she said I wasn't the man she was proud to call father, I paused, letting that truth settle like dust in sunlight. I knew I had to fulfill a promise. I set the phone on the lectern, the same old device that had lived in the drawer beside Evelyn's scarf for 8 long years. I pressed play. Her voice, soft, exhausted, loving, filled the hall. "Michael, if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. I have one fear: our daughter is losing herself." The room froze. Not a breath. Not a whisper. Evelyn's voice trembled through the speakers, recounting things she had witnessed. Unfiltered, undeniable. Rachel's legs buckled. She grabbed the edge of the table. Adrian stared, stunned, as though the script he'd prepared had caught fire in his hands. When the recording ended, I looked directly at my daughter. I kept quiet for 8 years, not because I was ashamed, but because your mother wanted you to learn the value of character. Tonight, you tried to erase your family to fit into someone else's. The silence felt wide enough to walk through. Then I opened the leather folder. A single page gleamed under the lights, the deed to the downtown property Adrian's family always boasted about. You've all heard how the Langfords own half the city, I said. Here is one piece they've bragged about most. I lifted the paper. The legal owner is me. A ripple went through the room like wind through tall grass. Before anyone could speak, I unfolded the second document, the pre-signed merger contract from years ago. This, I said softly, is what they tried to force after my wife died. They hoped grief would make me weak. It didn't. I set both documents on the lectern. And since someone here was kind enough to suggest I was rebuilding, I'll clarify something else. I unlocked my phone, turned the screen outward. 3 accounts, 3 balances, more than $70 million combined. Gasps scattered through the hall like breaking glass. Adrian's mother sank into her chair. His father stared at the screen as if someone had unplugged the world. Rachel covered her mouth, tears streaming, but silent, too silent. I lowered the microphone. I didn't come here to shame anyone. I didn't come to boast. I came because my daughter used my wife's memory to rise in a room that never saw me as anything but a burden. I stepped back from the mic, letting the truth breathe. And now that the truth is out, I can finally let go. I walked back to table 19, quietly, calmly, while the entire hall remained frozen. And in that silence, for the first time in years, I felt free. The morning after the wedding, the world didn't feel victorious. It felt quiet. I brewed my usual cup of coffee, listening to the soft drip and the low hum of the old kitchen fan. The sun slid slowly across the counter, warming the edge of the folded documents I had carried for so long. No applause, no anger, just the old rhythm of a life I had built piece by piece. People online called it the wedding reckoning. They reposted clips, argued in comment sections, treated it like entertainment. But to me, it wasn't victory, it was closure, a long overdue exhale. That night taught me something I think many of us learned too late. Silence is noble only until it becomes the knife someone else uses. My daughter, Rachel, reached out days later. Her voice was tired, thin around the edges. Dad, can we talk? And we did. Not as enemies, not even as father and daughter, but as 2 people standing at the edge of something broken, trying to decide whether it was worth rebuilding. She cried, not loudly, but the way grown children cry when they realize a truth that should have been clear all along. I didn't know, she whispered. I thought you stopped trying. I shook my head gently. No, I never stopped. I just wanted you to grow on ground that wasn't bought. She rested her forehead in her hands. The woman who'd once stood beneath chandeliers now looked small, human, reachable. And for the first time in years, I saw my little girl again. We didn't fix everything that day, but we opened a door. A small one, a necessary one. These days, I spend my mornings walking by the lake. The air is cool, the path quiet, and my steps slow enough to feel the world instead of chasing it. Sometimes, people ask whether revealing the truth was worth it, whether the pain it caused was justified. I don't answer them directly. I just say, respect, once lost, can be reclaimed if you wait for the right moment. And that's what this story, this long, painful story, really taught me. Redemption isn't loud. Justice isn't fast. Peace doesn't come in applause. It comes in the quiet. The kind of quiet where you can finally breathe without fear of being unseen. And for me, that was enough. Would you have done the same if it were you? Tell me in the comments. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, I'd be grateful if you subscribed.